Everybody, and welcome to And Action. I'm Tommy DiNucci here with Mike Messier, and I can't believe it. It's already episode 14, and we are talking about wrestling the movie biz. We're going to dive into our love for professional wrestling, some of the great wrestlers that we've had a chance to work with, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, and overall just what it is about sports entertainers that lend itself so well to the movie industry, and why are they such great actors in front of the camera? What is it that we love about the entire genre? We're diving into wrestling. It's a great weekend. It's a big wrestling weekend. We've got a lot of exciting wrestling things in the wrestling world happening. We've got SummerSlam this weekend, of course. Can't talk about wrestling this week without talking about Ric Flair's last match coming up. There's just all sorts of exciting stuff happening in the world of pro wrestling. Of course, there's some wild news. WWE longtime chairman Vince McMahon has just stepped down. That's some pretty crazy news. So the world of professional wrestling is just a hotbed right now. I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and I don't know that it's ever been kind of hotter in the sense where it's all over the place. It's on every social media platform. We're in a crazy wrestling time, so this is a great time to do the show. Mike, how the hell are you? How's your week going? I know you're fired up to talk about wrestling. Can you tell I'm a little excited?
It's a big week for professional wrestling fans and participants. Tommy, you have, to me, the main event of the whole thing is Ric Flair's last match, teaming up with his actual son-in-law Andrade against the 55-year-old Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, and that should be a very interesting tag. I also really like that undercard, Tommy. You have the Briscoes, the modern-day Briscoes against Kevin Von Erich's sons, so you have some really interesting matches on that show. And then, of course, you do have the WWE with their SummerSlam on Saturday night. Interestingly enough, they're going up against the UFC show just a couple hours later. And also, very interesting, like you said, as officially, Vince McMahon has retired. And of course, you can Google the news and see the reasons for that. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting week for pro wrestling fans, Tommy.
Yeah, it really is wild. I mean, let's just back it up a little bit. Pro being a pro wrestling fan is kind of funny because through the years, wrestling has kind of always had its peaks and valleys in terms of popularity. Like a lot of different entertainment elements out there, a lot of different types of programs, whether it's reality TV shows or even certain types of sports. It's cyclical, right? Like there are these, cycles that it goes through.
Right.
I don't want to go too deep into it, but I'm going to try to approach this following hour and a half that we talk about it on the show, as if people don't really know much about wrestling. Mike and I were we self-proclaimed wrestling geeks. Mike even knows way more than me. I'd consider him like a bona fide historian.
Oh,
Uh,
thanks.
but let's face it, I'm sitting here wearing a goddamn Roddy Piper button-down shirt. So clearly, this is kind of something that we're into. But we're going to talk to you, the listener, the viewer, like, this is your first time ever hearing anything about wrestling, because we want to kind of help articulate how much this means to us. And not only that, but why it means what it does to us. So we're going to get right into it. Wrestling's one of those things where, like I said, it's gone in cycles. And I can remember times when I was a very little kid, meaning like a child, when, Hulk Hogan was at the top of the entertainment world and wrestling was very big. And every little kid just about had a Hulk Hogan action figure or a WWF lunchbox or some kind of merch that was, printed with the old WWF, because back then it was the World Wrestling Federation before the World Wildlife Fund or whatever they were,
Right.
sued them. That's a whole nother story. We ain't going to get into that. But the idea is, as when I was a little kid, like a lot of children, they get into wrestling and it's all good. But then when you grow up, wrestling's often one of those things that you kind of shed as you get a little bit older, and a lot of times when those romantic feelings start to come about, and maybe you're into you're starting to date a little bit, and whoever you're trying to court might not be considered cool to like wrestling anymore. So maybe suddenly you trade in your wrestling t-shirts for the Abercrombie and Fitch t-shirt or whatever the fuck you're wearing at the time, because you want to impress some girl or whatever it is, whoever you're trying to impress. So for me, like a lot of wrestling fans, I've had what they call dark years where you go off the grid and you don't watch for a little bit of time, but something about it always brings me back. And then, of course, there are guys like Mike who, to my knowledge, has really never had dark years. You know, his entire life since he was a child, single digit age, wrestling has been there for him, like that warm, cozy hug.
Right.
Um, so Mike, why don't you get into a little bit about, what wrestling means to you and what is it that, for all these years, it's been your friend that you can kind of check in with and a reliable source of entertainment as we crack a Red Bull to get into the third act of our day.
Well, bro, I can say that when I was a kid, and wrestling was still kind of in that territory, like the waning days of the territory system for the wrestling fans. Basically, wrestling hadn't even done WrestleMania one, so it was still kind of that old cigar smoked arena vibe that sometimes Vince McMahon makes fun of. So this is like going way back for me. Whenever, like for me as a kid, if you're watching something you're not supposed to watch, that's what made it all the better. And take another example from films. My parents would take me to R-rated movies. A lot of times they just buy me the ticket and let me go see it by myself. So I'm seeing Poltergeist. I'm seeing, Psycho 2 in the theater when I'm pretty young. So I was pretty exposed to adult stuff that most kids, or a lot of kids at least, were not watching at a young age. I was. Wrestling fell right in line with that because you got, I remember taking wrestling magazines to school. I used to get the subscriptions to the Inside Wrestling and the Wrestler, and I was so happy when that manila envelope came in from TV Sports in New York. I thought it was so exotic to get mail from New York, and I bring this wrestling magazine to school in sixth grade. I'm sitting there reading it. There happens to be an article of Killer Tim Brooks taking a piece of rope and kind of squishing it against the guy's head, Bobby Jaggers, and drawing blood from his head. And it was a black and white photograph. But my teacher, Mr. Rafalco, said, "Hey, Mike, what are you reading?" I said, "Oh, a wrestling magazine." He said, "Oh, cool. Can I take a look?" I said, "Sure." So I hand him the wrestling magazine, and the first thing he sees is this bloody bull rope match, and his face just kind of soured. And he asked me to ask my mom if I could start bringing in some non-wrestling magazines for reading time in school. So that
That's
kind
so funny, and just to interject there, like, if you don't know, again, I'm gonna try to treat this like people don't really know much about it. The wrestling magazines of the day, they were very kind of graphic. It's funny because wrestling was always something that was geared towards family, it was family entertainment, it's for kids. However, it always straddled that line of very kind of oddly dark violence because let's face it, what does everyone always say to knock wrestling? Wrestling's fake, right?
right,
Wrestling's not real. That's all bullshit. Well, through the years, to what they call protect the business, they've had to project this image of gnarly violence. Like, no, no, this is very serious. And part of that would be in these wrestling publications that are often referred to as the Apter magazines, because a gentleman by the name of Bill Apter would produce them out of New York City. They would print these very violent photos with lots of blood, and it was almost like a little bit of a, "Hey, yeah, you think wrestling's fake? Well, how do you explain this massive gash in this guy's forehead?"
right.
Real quick, we're checking in with some of our regulars. We've got Stephen E here as always. Great to hear you're with us, Stephen E, and I know you're a big wrestling fan too, so I think you're gonna like this show.
You got some,
Uh,
yeah.
Donna, what's happening? Donna says, "Wrestling fan as a kid, forced force fed habit by my sibling, no regrets." Hey,
Good
I think a
sibling.
lot of us get into something that our sister or brother forces us into, but let's face it, secretly we kind of like it a little bit too. That's how I was with 90210 when my sister would force me to watch it. Kim Kaling, always great to see you. Kim's dad loved pro wrestling. Stephen E knows Bobby Jaggers, knows his world WW. What's that
World
world class?
Wrestling Council out of Puerto Rico is what he's referring to.
Wow, Stephen E rolls deep. See, Stephen is an expert, clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the magazines were big. So, Mike, I think it's fair to say that I think that you liked the taboo nature of pro wrestling. That's kind of what brought you into it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, Tommy. I always liked being the guy that knew the most about pro wrestling amongst the people I knew. So I kind of took some pride in that. And, I mean, some people throughout my life have not appreciated it or respected it, but I always did. And another quick example, in elementary school, did you have PE class, Tommy, where you had to have gym?
Say that again. You broke up a
Did
little
you have
bit
to
there.
Okay. In my physical education class in middle school, we had a separate gym clothes outfit. Like you'd wear the same
Oh
gym
yeah, of
clothes
course.
all week.
Sure.
Right. So I happen to have in my locker a Road Warriors t-shirt, really nice one. Jim Crockett Promotions, Hawk and Animal, and Paul Ellering. For the non-fans, this is like a really big tag team of the time, kind of like the Kiss of pro wrestling. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. So I had this t-shirt, and a friend of mine, Scott Nyberg, came to me in a panic because he didn't have his gym clothes at school. Like he brought them home to wash them, and he forgot to bring a new set of gym clothes to school, and whatever he was wearing, a preppy shirt or something, wouldn't be good for gym. So he asked me if he could borrow my gym clothes, and I said, "Okay, buddy." And I gave him the combination to my lock, and he took my Road Warriors shirt, and apparently he was so embarrassed that it was a pro wrestling shirt, even though he was also a pro wrestling fan. He turned the shirt inside out to wear it, and he ripped the tag off the back of the shirt,
What a
which
little
caused,
prick. What a
yeah,
little fucking prick.
yeah,
Pardon
that's
my
how I
friend.
felt. Yeah, I
You
felt
should
it
have
was a prick.
DDT'd him in front of the entire gym class for
Well,
doing
this is
that
a
shit.
guy that I mean, we're supposed to be friends here. I'm letting him borrow my shirt, and he's not only disrespecting the Road
Just another
Warriors,
example of how shameful wrestling is kind of deemed by the masses.
and yeah, but for me, it was like I would never think to turn the shirt inside out, I guess I just didn't care what people thought, but this guy did. So weakness of character on his part.
Yeah, it's a shame. I feel like wrestling is very much misunderstood, and I'm hoping that by the end of this next, chunk of time with us, maybe we can turn a couple people, or at least let them see why it is that we seemingly, we seem like men of average intelligence, right? We're not complete morons. We
No,
like it.
we're
There's
above
something there
average.
there to be seen. Checking in, we got Miss Ash here, always there to say hello and chime in. Wonder if
Guerrero
Miss
likes our shirts. I
Wonder
got
wonder who Miss
Roman
Ash's
Rowdy,
favorite wrestler is.
Ant,
And then we have
Anthony.
our man Ant Figueroa Films putting over our shirts a little bit. We got Roddy Piper here, and it looks like Mike has the loose cannon Brian Pillman.
Yeah.
We just watched a Brian Pillman match the other night. So yeah, pro wrestling's one of those things where I think it kind of, for me, what it is that gets me is, even to this day, why I love watching matches is really for two reasons. Number one, I love the aspect of the nostalgia. When I watch a wrestling match, particularly from when I was a kid, whether it's the early to mid '90s, late '90s, I'm in a fucking time machine and I'm strapped in and I can kind of set my date and suddenly it's 1998 all over again. And as I watch these matches, I'm able to remember all these other things that were going on in my life at the time, whether it's you were a freshman in high school when this happened, or what kind of t-shirt were you wearing, or what kind of clothes did you wear at the time. So I think wrestling has this great kind of replayability where it can almost act as this nostalgia like warp chamber where you can kind of go right back to an era. And for me, sometimes what I like about that is even if I'm watching really old wrestling, like before I was born, like wrestling from the 70s, I'm a filmmaker. So I like to think of everything that I see as a kind of like a historical snapshot in time. So if I'm doing a movie on the 70s and I'm watching like a match that took place in 1975, I love looking at like the crowd and seeing like what the audience is wearing, what they're what kind of hats do they have, what kind of shirts do they have, how are they interacting with each other. A friend made a remark just the other night while we were all watching wrestling. We were watching wrestling from the late 90s and he said, "Wow, you know what's cool? Like look at none of the fans are on their phone. Every one of those fans is just looking at the match." And it was weird to like look up at a crowd and see like everyone just intently watching what's going on in the ring and not have one person looking down, not one person taking a photo, not one person giving a fuck about what this fictitious world of social media thinks about
Right.
what they're doing at the moment. They're just in the moment and they're watching the show. So I like wrestling because it's a portal to a different time, but also for me it's a pure level of escapism in the sense that for me, this is maybe just for me, and this is why wrestling specific, everyone can like it for different reasons. But for me, I study movies all the time. I write scripts that involve cinematic elements all day long. For me, like, watching a movie at times, I can lose its luster, but watching a wrestling match, there's this element of unpredictability where I can try to guess what's gonna happen, but I really don't know what the fuck is going to happen. I don't know exactly what direction I'm gonna go in a way, and I don't mean this in a derisive way at all, and I'm not trying to dunk on wrestling and make it sound simple or stupid, but, like, I'm, like, in love with the simplicity of it and the fact that I can really just, like, not have to do too many mental push-ups to just be entertained, if
Right.
that makes sense.
It does. And, a lot of times, Tommy, when I have a day where I'm watching different YouTube videos or masterclass, if I'm feeling intellectual or whatever I'm watching, Discovery Plus, at the end of the day, a lot of times, like yourself, probably the best thing to watch right before you go to sleep is a good old fashioned wrestling match because it kind of takes your brain to a different level. If you watch CNN right before you go to sleep, you might have nightmares about the world around you. But if you watch Sting versus Vader from 1993's Super Brawl 3, you probably have a nice slumber, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of funny, man. And wrestling fans watching this, and maybe non-wrestling fans, give it a try. I've actually had situations where like napping during the day, like if I'm on like an overnight movie, it's kind of tough to sleep during the day. I will put a wrestling match on just enough at the volume level where I can kind of hear it, but I kind of can't. And just the sounds of like body slams and like the a suplex on there, like that shit is kind of like white noise to me sometimes, and it really can help me kind of just relax a little bit. Checking in with Stephen E here, who tells us that when I was young, a guy from WWF corporate bought a Lincoln from my godfather, gave me a bunch of collectibles, a
Nice.
Bushwhacker hat, that's awesome, a Damien snake, that's a really cool piece of memorabilia, I've seen that thing, Hasbro made that. Signed pictures of Hulk Hogan, Jake the Snake, perfect, and Kerry Von Erich. Dude, do you still have that Kerry Von Erich autograph? Because I got news for you. It's very valuable. Kerry Von Erich hasn't signed a whole lot lately, if you know what I mean. Rest in peace. The poor guy died, I think, in what, 1994, was it?
1990, February of 1993, right before Andre the
93.
Giant.
So, like, yeah, think about that. The man did not he signed a lot of autographs during his run, but it's been a while. So if you still have that, maybe we can talk and make a deal, brother. Let's talk about it. And our first ever and action collectible acquisition
Exchange.
exchange. But yeah, back to our topic. Always loved wrestling, got into movies. Oh man, Steven, he says he still has it.
Nice
He still
man.
has it,
Nice
guys. Oh
move,
boy.
man.
Oh boy. Um, so basically, wrestling's always been a big part of my life. It's always been there. I make the joke. It's that kind of hug from your familiar friend. It's chicken soup for the soul. It's home cooking. It's something that makes you relaxed. And it can just fucking blindly entertain you without any kind of agenda. And it's just there for you. It's a consistent something for us. Um, so when I got into making films, and I always kind of like would think, and I don't even realize I'm doing it, but when I'm writing sometimes, I've always realized that, and we can get into this deeper in one of our script writing stories, but like a lot of times when I'm writing an action sequence, particularly like a fight scene, I realize that a lot of the elements happening in the fight scene are like wrestling, where good guy is punching bad guy, good guy gets the advantage. Bad guy does something deceptive and deceitful, some
Right.
kind of cheap shot. Now bad guy has the advantage. Bad guy's friend comes in. Now it's two bad guys beating up one good guy. But then guess what? Another good guy comes in and saves the day when you least expect it. Guys, everything I just said in that little exchange there, as simple as it sounds, that's pro wrestling booking in its simplest form. Like, how do we get the audience to flip back and forth from who's going to have the advantage, whether it's our hero, our villain, what kind of surprise elements will come in? Is it going to be a fair fight? Will there be interference? What's going to happen? So I've always kind of like, without even realizing it, would call it, you hear a lot of wrestling fans call it pro wrestling logic. You'll hear a lot
Right.
that term. I've always used a lot of pro wrestling logic in my writing when I'm writing action scenes and fight scenes and things like that. So it's always kind of been there. And then when I made self-storage, I remember, and if you go back and listen to the self-storage episode, which I want to say was episode 11 or 12, maybe
It was
12.
sooner. I thought it was sooner than that, but I could
Was
be
it
wrong.
13?
Oh, it was just recently. You're right. You're right. I was thinking of the Eric Roberts
I think it was
episode.
12. But anyway, check out our self-storage episode. I don't want to reiterate too much from that. But basically, I had to cast a role. There was one part left. It was a one-day role. It's kind of a cool role. It opened up the movie. Guy had some cool lines of dialogue and then gets really freaked out. So I was there with David Gear, who you'll find is going to be sort of the connective tissue to a lot of our wrestlers in the movies, kind of a little bit of a highway from Wrestlerville into Movieville is David Gear.
E.G.
So
Hagen. Yeah.
say that again.
He's got a cousin that's a manager in the pro wrestling world, D.G. Haven,
Right.
who's
My
managing
cousin
top
Mike
independent.
is Mike is being cute. It's actually DG Haven is actually a I'm going to give up from a break kayfabe. DG Haven is a character that David Gear would often assume as his pro wrestling moniker, also known as, again, if you're not a wrestling fan, we call that a gimmick. That's his gimmick.
Very
But
Jimmy Hart-esque, I would say.
yeah, he was. Let me tell you something. I've said this many times, and I'm going to be giving David Gear a lot of praises as the shows go on. So I don't want to give him too many flowers and give him too big of a head. But I've said this many times. I think David Gear is one of the better wrestlers in terms of like managers, rather, in terms of like David just has the innate ability to walk into a room and get heat. And if you don't know what heat is, that means like he can get everyone in the room to want to fucking kill him. He can whip a room up into a frenzy to the point where like the nicest old lady would want to like throw their chair at him and a little kid would swear at him and like he could get a room excited. So you're gonna hear a lot of David Gear talk because this is the big wrestling podcast that we're doing, and like I said, he connected a lot of those dots. So I needed to cast this part, and David basically says, hey, I can get you Tommy Dreamer to play that part. And again, Tommy Dreamer, if you don't know who he is, there was a sort of a band of wrestling misfits called the ECW, known as Extreme Championship Wrestling, and they worked often out of the East Coast wrestling promotion and kind of blood and guts, really tough, hard nosed wrestling.
Barbed Wire City, they called it in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Mike was a big fan of this program. Mike actually attended many ECW events and wrote articles about them. And if you're a wrestling fan, you know that ECW had a major place in sort of the development and I should say the evolution of like where the current product is. A lot of the sort of shock value violence type wrestling stuff that you see today, whether it's somebody being thrown through a table or somebody being thrown off of a very high object that no human should ever be dropped off of. All that shit kind of evolved from ECW. I mean, yes, a lot of it came from Japan, a lot of it came from Mexico, but here in America, ECW, they were the trailblazers for like what we consider all that crazy shit. As Stephen E, I think is going to chime in.
Hardcore
style. Extreme Championship Wrestling. Yes, it was first Eastern Championship Wrestling, of course. So basically, Tommy Dreamer was sort of the band leader, one of the flag bearers of ECW. So during the mid '90s, if you were a wrestling fan, you knew that Tommy Dreamer was not only a big part of ECW, but he was a good guy. He was what we call a babyface. He was somebody that if you were a 14-year-old kid like myself at the time, you would want to be cheering for Tommy Dreamer in his match. You'd be getting behind him, and I was behind him as a little kid. So when I find out that he could be, a 3-hour car ride from, Yonkers, I think he lives in Yonkers, and be on my set the next day, I was fucking thrilled. And it was a really great day. And Tommy didn't come alone that night or the next night. He came with a young wrestler that he trained who was just kind of making a little bit of headway in TNA and had done some stuff. Her name was Rosita at the time. Her real name is Thea Trinidad, but you know her better as Zelina Vega, who is now a major WWE superstar. So at the time, she was just Thea, and obviously, Thea and I have been able to stay in contact to this day, and she's an awesome person. And it's one of those things where she always had a great attitude, and it's no question that she's been able to achieve the success that she has achieved because of her attitude and because of the hard work that she's kind of always put in. So we're really happy to see where she's kind of literally. I mean, again, I know, like I said, I'm going to try to gear this towards people that don't know much about wrestling. You can't really turn on your wrestling TV these days. You know, any wrestling program you see nowadays, if you turn it on, you're going to probably see a clip or a highlight or something of Zelina Vega. So she's really achieved some amazing things, which is really cool. So that was self storage. You know, the fact that there we were, just kind of. I'm just literally trying to fill a spot. I have
Okay.
no. I have no. We got a lot of spam.
Yeah,
Uh,
you get spammed. Welcome to online stuff. You can block them, I think, if you
yeah, we're getting a lot of
right click
spammers. I
on them.
apologize if anybody sees any naked HD
Don't
uh,
go to those
Tinder
sites.
girls. I'm seeing a lot of emojis with little
Yeah, it's
hearts
horrible.
and things like that.
You
That's
can block them. There's a way to block them. I think you can right click on them.
we're
Tommy,
gonna
I
work
think
on that.
I could be wrong, but you brought Thea Trinidad, Queen Zelina, and Tommy back for Army of the Damned. Your next film, right?
Yes, that's correct. Army of the Damned was great because we were able to kind of remember Thea and Tommy had a very small role in self storage. They were just there for the night. And I'm kind of one of those filmmaker guys that like, you know, if something goes well, like if I have a good experience with a talent and it's small and we were able to do something small, but it was done in such a way where I feel like the piece of talent got something out of it. I got something out of it in the sense that we had a great scene. I'm always going to bring them back. Like if I have a good experience with you on set, you're always going to get a chance to come back. It might not be on the next movie. You know, like this is a rare case where it really was back to back. But like, you know, not every filmmaker's like that, but for me, it's like I don't think of it like going back to the well. I think of it like going back to a proven commodity. So, like, if you're on my set, and even if you say one fucking line, or even if you just walk across the goddamn frame, but you do it in a way that it's done right, as simple as that sounds, I'm gonna want you back,
Yeah.
you know, on something. So,
Dance with the girls that you brought to the dance type of thinking. If you're
yeah, exactly. Like, why would I cast somebody else? This person was here for me and did a great
proving
job.
themselves and so
Um,
forth.
quick update: Stephen E has reported the nasty spammers. Thank you for that. We appreciate
Thanks,
it. These
buddy.
guys, people need to get a life. These robots, sexual robots. That sounds like a band from
Yeah.
like the late
Like,
'90s.
you
Sexual robots. The
say
new band.
early 80s, like pop punk. Uh,
Yeah. So sexual robots aside, it's one of those things where this was their chance to come back. Army of the Dam was great, and then I even had another spot to fill, and Tommy Dreamer breaks out his phone and he's like, "What do you think about her?" And he shows me a picture of none other than Maria Kanellis, who had just moved to the Rhode Island area. She was actually in Massachusetts at the time, so she was like not too far away, and
right.
basically like a car ride away. I looked at Maria Kanellis's picture. I looked her up, and at the time we had talked about the dark years of wrestling. This was kind of like Maria's height of her days in the ring was kind of during my dark days, and I wasn't. I was kind of like, oh, I've heard of her, but I don't. And then I like did a little more research, and I was like, absolutely, yes, we need her in this movie right away. So we got her on set, and she was awesome, and at the time was dating. They weren't married at the time, but she was dating Mike Bennett. And I remember Mike came to set and kind of met everybody. And lo and behold, a movie later, I made a film called Almost Mercy. And then I'm working with Mike Bennett. And I remember again, like, let's talk a little bit about the why, like, why are wrestlers great? What is it that makes them great on screen? Well, particularly in this, one of the main reasons why I cast Mike in Almost Mercy, I had to do this like, in the wrestling business, it's called a flat back bump. And it's basically when you go like fully on your back and risk hitting the back of your head. And really just like you got to have the kind of guts to take that full impact of the blow on your back square and just take it. And obviously there's some technique to it and how you break fall and all that. And that's kind of the science behind what makes a great wrestler great, their ability to do these things that appear to be incredibly dangerous and incredibly well, I shouldn't say they are still dangerous, but what a great wrestler does is they take something very dangerous that looks like it should fucking damn near paralyze you, and they make it so that they're able to kind of get up without a scratch on them. And that's the magic. And there's listen, I can't get into it because I don't know enough about it, but I've heard a little, that you hear these kind of little kind of dribs and drabs from wrestlers over the years about like 7 points of contact. Like I've heard guys say like when you take a bump, that's what it's called when you fall on the ground, it's called a bump. When you take a bump, you want as many points of contact hitting the ground, even if it is like your heel, the side of your foot, your hand, your elbow,
Right.
the back of your elbow. Like there's just these ways that these people can artfully land where it's like a Buster Keaton movie and they do these incredibly dangerous things, but they don't break bones. They don't rupture their fucking spleen. They know how to do it the right way. It's technique. It's not, that's why that's the big misconception about wrestling is like, well, it's not just going and fake play fighting. It's the fact that like these guys can throw a punch that, comes literally like, an eighth of an inch from your face and make it look like you're getting decked. But the next day they're able to drive to the next town and not have a massive fucking black eye on their face. And as far as the audience knows in that particular town, they're fresh and ready for a new match the next night. So it's a pretty amazing illusion. To me, it's right up there with doing a fucking magic show. The
Yeah.
fact that these guys can appear as though they're inflicting this much damage on one another, go to the bar that night, have a fucking beer and a burger together, and then the next night go to another town and do it all over again. Like that's the part that's always kind of been fun for me. So got a little off track there, but basically the reason why Mike Bennett got the job was because he had to get shot with basically he gets hit up with this assault rifle and gets thrown back and has to do this crazy like flat back bump. And I remember telling Mike, like, all right, man, so you're going to get shot and you're going to launch yourself and we're going to put the gator back on you. If you don't know what a gator back is basically a motorcycle. It's like a motocross piece of equipment that you wear underneath a shirt that often stunt people will put on underneath their clothing so that when they have to land on their back, their spine's protected. They're not going to take all that concussion right to the soft spot of the back. They're going to have a little bit of it's like a turtle shell, basically. You get a little turtle shell for yourself. So I said to Mike, I was like, we're going to put the gator back on you. He's like, wait a minute. I get a pad? And we're like, yeah, we're going to put the pad on you. He's like, oh, wow. I never get pads when I'm wrestling. This is great. This is crazy. So once I put that pad on him, he was like, forget it. Like it looked like he got shot with an elephant gun because he really like gave it to me in terms of like when you watch that movie, like Mike Bennett's death in that film is like it's a work of art. Like he flies through the air. Like the Russian judges would give even a 10
Right.
after watching the flight. So again, that's something where had I cast, yes, there's I don't want to say a million, but yeah, there are plenty of stunt performers that could have came in and done that job. But I don't know that they would have been as eager to do it. I don't know that they would have just innately knew exactly what to do. And here's the other side of it. Mike wasn't just a tackling dummy in that movie. He had some on-screen moments too, and he's got a great look. He's all jacked up to jacked to the gills. And I needed somebody who looked like a really tough-looking, formidable police officer. So, you get a little bit of everything. You get that cool appearance. You get the ability that, not only do they look good, but they're functional. They know how to take these kind of bumps and do these kind of stunts. It's really a no-brainer. And I mean, obviously, we all know that a good part of the wrestling industry is not just the in work, the in-ring work, but also talking people into the building, cutting what's called a promo. Anytime you see the interview, either before the match or after the match, those are the kind of skills that, well, guess what? When they're playing those characters, they're essentially acting. They're not really, they're not really all this fucking crazy and jacked up and high energy all the time. These are characters that they're playing. So, they can handle a performance. That especially in today's product, wrestlers are given a script nowadays. Everything you see in the ring when they're talking, I mean, that's all scripted. So they have a lot of the similar skill sets and the right skill sets that you'd need to thrive in the movie world.
And a lot of times, what's great about pro wrestlers when they do films, kind of like the Mike Bennett story you just told, is that it's actually easier for them to do a fight scene in a movie where you can do different takes and you're not trying to convince a live audience that it's real. The camera's helping you rather than hurting you. You know, in a pro wrestling match that's broadcast on television, the camera can pick up all the tricks. And there's, things like Botchamania on YouTube that exploit that. But in a film where you're trying to make everything look great or as good as possible, the wrestlers benefit from that, and I think they appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Mike. I love that you said that. You just reminded me of something really cool. On the set of Army of the Damned, Tommy Dreamer had a really gnarly fight scene where he basically goes from human cop mode to crazy demon beast mode, and everybody's fighting him at once. It's like the classic, like 3 or 4 people onto one kind of scenario. And there's this scene where he rips a old school metal first aid kit off of like a rescue type truck, and he rips the first aid kit off, and I didn't tell him to fucking do this. This was him just being in the moment, and then he like he like hits himself with it, and then like goes charging after the people, and he splits his head open.
Right.
And I was like, "No, Tommy." I go, "Hey, man, like, I got it. Now you got a big cut in your head. Like, I gotta like, we gotta put makeup on that or something because like it's continuity. Like, you didn't have that on your head before, and remember, when they hit you, don't actually allow yourself to get hit. Like in a couple of the shots, like he actually wanted to be hit.
Right.
Like he was like, no, make it look real, like really hit me. I'm like, well, we can sell it like I need you to have no, new cuts on your face.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to be working with Tommy and that level of like, oh yeah, I'll just hit myself with the thing because he's just so used to doing that. Like the idea that like I got a little cut on my forehead, I don't give a shit. Like that happens on every town that I travel to, and it's just funny because like any actor that you were working with, and again, please, I'm not trying to say Tommy's not an actor. He's a terrific actor, but any like, that's my number one job. That's my lot in life.
Full-time actor, let's say, yeah.
If they got a split in their forehead, they'd be done for the night.
They'd be
They'd be like,
calling unions and
"That's it. I'm out of here.
right.
I got to
Calling
go to the
religion.
fucking." They'd say, "Where's the medic? Get the set medic here." They'd be getting a trip to the emergency room. They'd probably have to get butterfly stitch or whatever the fuck. Miss Ash chimes in. She likes the storylines,
She likes the
and you know what?
storylines.
I think that that's what's great about a lot of pro wrestling is the fact that they try to make it like a buffet in the sense where there's usually on any given major card you've got about 8 to 10 really good matches, right, Mike? About 8 to 10.
Yeah, 8 to 10 is a pretty average number for a wrestling show. Yeah.
And, that's 8 to 10 storylines for the most part that you have to kind of pay attention to. And with that, some of those storylines are going to be comedic. Some of those storylines are going to come with a lot of haha. Some of those storylines are going to be scary. There's going to be a little dark.
Or
There's gonna be
romance.
or a little fucked up. Or like Mike said, maybe there's some romantic stories in there involved. There's a little romance. What other kind of storylines can you think of off the top of your head, Mike?
Betrayal. A lot of things are like the tag team partner turned on his tag team partner. Going back to the Rockers, Shawn Michaels, who's one of the top wrestlers in the world now, he made his mark, so to speak, by turning on his tag team partner, Marty Jannetty, I believe in
Surprise,
19.
how about surprise returns, Mike? A surprise return, a
Right.
person from the past. Like that's a common storyline in a lot of films, Somebody from your past returns. So think about it. Wrestling is go ahead.
Mentor protege. We see that
Yes.
with Ric Flair, Jay Lethal thing, and probably the biggest example of that. A lot of our old time fans would appreciate this. The Larry Zbyszko, Bruno Sammartino student teacher fight that your buddy
Or
Steve
or
Feinberg would remember.
or even how about brother versus brother with Bret and Owen Hart? So I guess what I'm trying to say in this long roundabout point as uh Mr. Sanchez chimes in. What's up, brother? Yes, Warrior did have the best returns. Whether he came back in the mid 90s, whether he came back in WCW in 98, that was a big fucking deal. Warrior he always had the ability that there's something about that brand. Even if it was just for that first couple weeks he returned, the return was always a big deal. You're absolutely right about that. Very good point. But yeah, back to what I was saying in this roundabout, convoluted point that I'm making is very rarely in any other form of entertainment through the course of 1 2 to 3 hour sitting, if you will, of entertainment, do you get to experience that many storylines and that many romance, comedy, betrayal, you fucking name it. It's all gonna happen under one 20, one, whatever, 10 to 20 people involved in these matches will give you all that in one 3 hour show wrapped up with a bow around it. So that's why I say it's a buffet. That's why I think it's a little bit for everyone. Good point, Ash. It's all about the storylines if you love good wrestling. Let's kind of segue into Mike. I know that you've had some experiences. Tell us one of your dealings with a pro wrestler by the name of he's had many monikers. Old school wrestlers will know him as Scotty Flamingo. ECW fans will know him as Raven. WCW fans will know him as Raven. Tell us about what your experiences were working with kind of a little bit of an honorary pro wrestler. We've been talking about good experiences. We're going to talk about one of the bad experiences.
Well, it's an interesting experience. I first met Scotty the Body at a wrestling convention when I was 13 years old, and he was there, but he hadn't won a match yet, which was kind of his gimmick. Like, this guy hasn't won a match yet. So that was his first gimmick in wrestling. And he was really cool. I remember that at the time, just being 13, and it kind of planted a seed for several years later. I was trying to get this project called Wrestling with Sanity off the ground, and I had this vision for a character called Hell's Champion. And basically, the first guy that came to mind was Raven, the brooding ECW. He's kind of a gothic, Edgar Allan Poe inspired, cryptic, Pearl Jam listening wrestler, right? And so I wrote him an email through his website at the time, and he actually responded within a day or two and said he was up for it as long as I could pay him. And so that's kind of where we hit some trouble. And then along the way, I switched gears into making a comedy called Chris and the Coffee Girl and went back to the Raven well. We hadn't even made Wrestling with Sanity, but I switched gears to this comedy and decided I wanted Raven to play a pickup artist book, basically a voiceover character for what would be an animated thing. The fault really is on me, a lot of it, Tommy, because try not to take a shortcut, but maybe to save some money, there was an opportunity to meet Raven, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia, halfway in Philadelphia. He was going to be there for the Extreme Reunion Super Show in Philly. So me and my buddy Tim, arranged to meet him and shoot our voiceovers in a Ramada Inn. Like, we rented a hotel conference room for our makeshift studio. We brought our green screen with us and all this stuff. And for me, it was a big deal. And I was really stretching my own budget, because this was all out of my own pocket. So I'm basically spending whatever money I have to do this. And I don't think Raven quite got that. Like, I think for him, he might have thought we had a $25,000 or $250,000 budget or something.
Well, time out. Maybe he just didn't give a shit. I think it's probably not that he didn't respect your position. I don't think he gave a fuck. I mean, listen, again, I'm not knocking Raven or pro wrestling in general, but some of these guys have over the years gotten a bit of a mercenary type attitude because, let's face it, we've seen these storylines in movies like The Wrestler. Where do a lot of these guys unfortunately end up? They end up in some convention hall trying to sell a photo for $20 and get a picture. So it's like, I understand the whole, like, yeah, buddy, I don't care if you ain't get the money. Like, this is what it costs to get Raven to get out of his hotel that day and come to your house, or get out of his office couch to come see you.
Yeah, I look back and at the whole thing, and it's like, I think perhaps he thought we would have another day to do this job. Like, he thought this was the beginning of the process. But for me, the urgency was like, no, we got to get this today. And so, long and the short of it, Tommy, is we did these voiceovers. Raven was kind of in a grouchy mood. It wasn't a very comfortable experience. Really, didn't do very well, except there was a very cryptic comedic element of me and Raven not agreeing on the script. And just recently, me and Tim released that footage on YouTube as Chris and the Coffee Girl, the Philadelphia Experiment, which I believe Stephen E has watched and enjoyed some of. But it's a 4-part, it's just basically the raw tapes of me and Raven as director and actor going at it and having some disagreements and some agreements. I do still like Raven, but it was a rough day. I would if I ever get the funding for that film to do it properly, I would still work with Raven if he wants to do it. But it was kind of a mess. I have worked with some other ECW guys, Tommy, and a couple of years before that, worked with a guy named Sandman in a very short piece that's also on my YouTube channel. I was doing the ring announcing for pretty close to you in Johnston. There was a place called Club Stars that I think was a former gentleman's club and somehow became a pro wrestling venue for about 6 months. And I was the ring announcer for a show. Sandman and New Jack was there, rest in peace. They actually attacked me with a Singapore cane after the match, which was kind of a nice rite of passage for a wrestler. And then in the dressing room,
there's nothing like taking a beating from a cane that says "Welcome to the show, kid."
right. So in the dressing room, I approached I approached Sandman, and I asked him if he would shoot a little scene for me for something I was trying to do, and he said, "Hey, buddy, I'll be happy to do it, but what are you paying me?" And I'm like,
see what I mean? They're just looking to make that couple bucks.
and for whatever reason, Tommy, I had 5 $20 bills in my wallet that day. I'm not sure why. And I just said, I got $80. You know, I didn't want to give it back.
Wow, so you kept an extra 20 for yourself.
I kept $20 for myself.
You didn't spring for the full $100 offer. I respect that.
So I give
What
them
did you do? Did you get a little snack on the way home with that $20 that you had left over? You get a little takeout on the way home?
I actually went to a friend's house to watch the Royal Rumble that night. So this was
Okay.
in January.
So you put that $20 to good use.
Yeah.
You packaged it. You said, Sandman, I'll give you 80. I need this 20 for my pizza or for my
I didn't even
Rumble.
tell him about the extra 20. I just lied to him and
flat out. Yeah, you held out. I respect that. You know what? He
Right.
tried to hustle you a little bit. You hustled him back.
I hustled him a little bit back. So I basically got 2.5 minutes out of him. And
so
then
that was you paid him basically $40 a minute to fucking
yeah. But I mean,
that's good money.
This is a long time ago, and the footage is still out there. It's on my YouTube channel, and believe it or not,
money off of that.
That little piece actually got into a film festival in Boston like 12 years after it was filmed. So
well, I'm happy to hear that. Listen,
Yeah.
although that you've had some mixed experiences with these guys, you were able to at least get the better of the Sandman in that saving that $20. Why don't we segue into I did a film called The Assault, which Mike, you actually worked on. People, if you watch the show, you'll find that a lot of times Mike's career and my career, they're oddly intertwined. And the reason a lot of times for that is, well, we've worked with a lot of the same producers, and a lot of times people do go back to that well with a lot of actors that they worked with in the past. But the reality is, we're making movies here in New England, and the pool ain't that big. It's
Right.
kind of one of those things where it's like, you got the same maybe couple hundred people that are really, really in the game for like almost every opportunity, that are known as people that can be relied upon. And it was even more kind of significant like that, in the sense where the pool was really small, particularly this was like 6-7 years ago now, maybe even 8 years ago. So we're making a movie called The Assault. It's a movie starring Tom Sizemore. And it's also, it's kind of like this, I guess you could call it like an action heist movie. And I find out once I'm already cast that Kevin Nash has been cast in the movie. And I get pretty goddamn excited because, I'd say like, ages like probably, I don't know, 6 to 10 for like a youngster are probably like the prime wrestling years, when like you believe that these superhero like characters exist and are organic, and these larger than life comic book heroes are in front of your eyes when you go see them in a venue. They're on your television. They're these real cosmic like beings, and you really buy into it at that age. So when I was like 10, the world champion was none other than Diesel, aka Kevin Nash. So Kevin Nash being in this movie and knowing Kevin Nash's career prior to that, again, like I've always followed Nash's career. I knew about the Ninja Turtles and him playing Shredder. Obviously, I loved him in Daredevil. He has this really great, I'm sorry, not Daredevil, the Punisher movie. He has this kick-ass fucking scene where he's this like Russian assassin and him and Thomas Jane just beat the ever-loving shit out of each other for like 10 minutes during this fight scene. So I've always loved Nash. Um, and knowing that I was going to work with him was just really fucking cool. And I'll never forget meeting him at this diner and kind of just walking in. And I think I had long hair at the time. And I remember he like kind of, cut a little bit of the tension. And again, shout out to David Gear. Because remember, like, this is big and this is a big thing to remember. And David's really good at this. And everyone listening can learn from David. How you frame an introduction of a person is very fucking important. It really is. Like, and if you're friends with someone and you really give a fuck about them and you want them to get over in life and do good things, when you introduce them to a person, go give them that little extra push. Give them a little something. So I'll never forget David Gear introduced me. Hey Kevin, this is my friend Tommy. He's an actor, but he's also a director. He's a writer. Really cool guy, loves the business. I think you guys would really hit it off. Like, again, I know it sounds simple, but just those couple sentences right there, it was just enough where it's not just like, oh, it's Tommy.
It's not
It's like
cold.
it didn't take a lot for David to just put together a couple extra sentences that now suddenly framed me as, well, if Kevin might have thought of me as a fucking PA for all we know prior to him saying that, but by saying just a couple little sentences about the person, giving them a little respect and introducing them in a proper way, now Kevin goes from like looking at his phone to like, oh, cool, hey man, what's up? And now we're talking. And had he just said, oh, this is Tommy, maybe he's still looking at the menu and figuring out what he's going to order, and he doesn't give a shit about engaging in the conversation. So that's one thing we can learn from David. He's really good at that. Again, I told you I'd be giving David his flowers on this episode. Really good.
Jump in on that, Tommy.
Go ahead, buddy.
I think you might have been with me at a wrestling show that DG Haven, David Gear's alter ego, was performing at. And I believe if David told us that night that he got the text back that Nash was going to be in this movie. And this was at the time that David was obviously a big Kevin Nash fan, had never worked with him before this. And we were there the exact moment when this text comes in his phone. And I never really seen not to say anybody ever happier, but really it was one of the times when I see a friend of mine really happy about something, which is kind of cool because it meant a lot that Kevin was going to be involved in this movie and David was excited about it.
You know what I think that was? Again, it's kind of funny to talk about this stuff. And if you're not a big fan of wrestling, this might not equate to you or this may not, process. But it's almost like Kevin was the WWE heavyweight champion of the world. And you can never take that away from Kevin, meaning he's on a fairly short list of people that held a very prestigious championship in the business. And much like being a champion in boxer, and they always still call you champ, even after you no longer have the title. It's kind of funny, and it's not obviously nearly the same level of importance, but a president is always a president. Kevin Nash will always be a world champion. When you look that up someday, and I know it sounds funny talking about it because it's all scripted, right? And it's all bullshit. But no, what that means is for that moment in time, the company said, you are our most marketable person. We are going to put this belt or this title on you because you represent this massive fucking multi-million-dollar company in the best possible light. You legitimize our sport of pro wrestling. So to be a champion, it's a big fucking deal. So I think David was very excited because David had worked with a lot of wrestlers. David was working in the wrestling business, but Kevin was the first like true champion that he had really kind of been in that close contact with.
A-level guy
as it gets.
NWO.
Yeah, Mike, you just hit it, and I'll let you go. But tell a little bit about the importance of the NWO and how Kevin Nash is a creator of the NWO. And
the NWO, the New World Order, was a group in the late 90s, started in summer of 96. And Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, and the late, great Scott Hall were basically these three guys who had spent some time in WWF, World Wrestling Federation. And through a couple of years of transition, they got over to WCW, and they were basically the outsiders. Like Scott Hall and Diesel or Kevin Nash were the real outsiders, plus Hulk Hogan turned on the yellow and red and started wearing black and white. This became a huge trend. Like, you can still find on Google or eBay NWO. It's just three simple letters: NWO, New World Order. They had their own music. They actually ended up having their own pay-per-view. There was talks that they were actually going to have their own weekly program. And Kevin Nash, who you're discussing, that we've worked with, and David Gear brought him to the table. He was not only a WWF World Champion for 10 months in 1994, but he was also a founding member of the NWO and was the first guy to beat Bill Goldberg at Starrcade. He had 2 WCW World title runs, etc. So in the pro wrestling world, Kevin Nash is an A-lister.
Well,
All
Mike,
day.
I think, how about this? We can go ahead and sum it up like this. He's a Hall of Famer, truly, in every sense of the world. He is in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Twice. And
Twice, that's right. As a member of the NWO and just as a solo entry, if you will.
And I'll just also say that as an actor, he's done pretty damn well too, because he's been in both Magic Mike movies. He was in a movie that I saw recently that was great called Dog, and he had like a 20-minute sequence when it's all him and the lead actor, Channing Tatum. Channing.
Channing Tatum.
Thank you. Yeah. So basically, Kevin Nash has played with some big time players. He's had scenes with Jada Pinkett Smith. There's a famous photo of him and Johnny Depp's ex, Amber Heard, from a rap party. There's a famous photo. So Kevin Nash gets around with some pretty top people, and it's been an honor to be on set with him.
Yeah, Kevin Nash is terrific. I'll tell you a couple of quick Nash stories. So Jacob Cooney, the writer-director of, at the time it was called Blue Line, but currently, if you're looking for it, it's called The Assault. It's starring Tom Sizemore and Kevin Nash, and I have a pretty cool part in it. And it's one of those things where we've talked about it a little bit before. Sometimes if you're an actor and you're able to improv and you get the right rapport with the director, they start liking what you're doing, and they start, call it like feeding the hot hand, meaning like, oh, this guy's kind of catching on. I like what this character's doing. How can we find ways to get this character in the movie more? Well, one of the ways was there was this scene where Kevin Nash is about to play poker in this movie, and I kind of play like his boss, and he's kind of like my henchman. And I walk in and I kind of pep him up, and I kind of like give him a little pep talk and then send him into this game, basically. And I remember thinking, A, it was so fucking cool that Jacob Cooney wrote that scene for me so that I could get a scene in there with Kevin Nash, which was just like, it kind of like a bit of a boyhood dream come true. Remember last week on Best Days on Set, we talked about what are some of the elements of our best days, and one of them is, throwing a little something to that inner child. What is it that you loved as a kid? You probably still love it. You just don't realize it, but it's in there somewhere. So like that, oh my God, I'm in a scene with Kevin Nash. Like that was amazing. And then I remember them literally having to build a fucking platform of like double stacked Apple boxes so that I could walk across this platform and share a frame with Kevin. Because that's the big thing that you don't realize. People, if you don't realize this, or if you don't know this, if you're not a wrestling fan, Kevin Nash is at least 6'10", maybe, when you put shoes on him, he's 6'11", 7 feet tall, but like with a nice heel, he's close to 7 feet tall, so it's one of those things where this is truly a giant, you know what I mean? Like in the amazing thing about Kevin, and not to turn this into a Kevin Nash show, but unlike a lot of, giants, for lack of a better word, he's completely proportionate. He's very handsome.
He doesn't have giantitis.
No, he's just a massive human being. So here I am, 5'10", and I'm gonna be in a scene with the 7-foot tall guy. There's like well over a foot away from us. So in a frame, we're not even in the same fucking frame. So they have to build this platform, and I have to like walk across this like 10-foot platform to get to Kevin, and I'm still fucking looking up at him, big time. even walking on this platform. So it's pretty fun to work with Kevin. And then another fun story is now Kevin's a big, we call him body guys in the wrestling business. Kevin is in amazing shape. To this
Right.
day, he stays very lean. He eats super clean. He's always working out, dedicated to the gym. It's kind of like, his big thing. And I've been fortunate enough to have some really in-depth conversations about bodybuilding and about training and about nutrition with him. I've always been a little bit of an amateur aficionado of fitness and training and things like that. So it was really cool to pick his brain. There was this hotel gym that he was working out at, and there were two hotels. There were like the A hotel and the B hotel. I was staying at the B hotel. I'm a young actor at the time. Like I'm across the street at the Quality Inn or whatever the fuck it was. Kevin's staying at like more like a Marriott type hotel literally across the highway. And there's a nice gym in that hotel. So I was able to kind of like finagle a room key from someone so that I could sneak in and go use the gym across the way. And I remember like hearing like through the grapevine and through talking to Kevin roughly what time he works out. And I remember him kind of like saying like, yeah, I'm probably gonna get in there in the morning or whatever. So I remember getting into the gym at like, 8 or 9 and just like working out. And I'm like purposely like I'm gonna work out nice and slow. Like I want Kevin to see me in the gym. Like that's what I want. I
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to I want to be able to maybe even have a workout with Kevin. Who knows? Like
Sure.
in my fantasy mind,
Spotting Diesel as he bench presses 450.
like in my mind, like what's happening is like I'm gonna get there the same time he gets there. He's gonna say, "Hey Tom, what are you working today?" I'm gonna say, "Well, hey Kev, I'm doing back." Wow, that's so funny, Tommy. I'm doing back too. Do you want to do a back workout together? I'd love to, Kev. Let's start lifting some. Let's do some lat pull downs right now. I'll grab this. Let's do some bent over row. I'm thinking that I'm gonna have this like fantasy workout with Kevin.
He starts calling you HBK
Yeah, like we're high-fiving, and I'm
number
spot
two,
he's
gives you an honorary.
we're having a fucking, like, Rocky montage of working out together in
Right
my
on
mind.
the beach. Yeah.
So I work out a little bit. I'm trying to take it slow because I don't wanna go through my whole workout, and he's, gonna come in late, and he's not showing up, and I'm like, "Fuck, man." I'm like, "Where is this guy?" Now, like, I've been in the gym for, like, an hour and a half now. I'm like a fucking psycho now, kinda, like, lurking. I'm just lurking around the gym, like, hoping that he'll show up. Finally, like, at the very end of where it's, like, ridiculous now, like, I've been in the gym for, like, fucking 2 hours. Like, I've already worked out 2 body parts. Now I'm actually getting in my head, and I'm like, "Well, now if he shows up and he wants to work out, I'm gonna look like a fucking bitch because, like, I'm weak. I've exhausted my body at this point. What am I gonna do?"
Right.
So, I, like, grab my shit, and I'm about to leave, and thankfully, I was able to save a little face, like, as I'm exiting, there's Kevin. He kinda sees me, I kinda see him. It wasn't the magical, "Let's work out and frolic in the gym together," but it was like, "Sup, bro?" And I was like, "Hey, man." And in my mind and we nothing, like,
Right.
parting ways. But in my mind, it was still a little bit of a personal victory because 'cause I'm like, "Kev saw me in the gym."
He saw you leaving early. You were leaving as he was coming in.
I had a good pump going. I probably looked halfway decent because I've been working out for 2 goddamn hours in preparation of maybe bumping into him, so I'm all pumped up. It's all going good. I feel like, I achieved what I needed to achieve. And then, one more quick story. The cool thing about Kevin, and it's funny because I've heard a lot of people talk about, these kind of encounters, and I feel like we'll eventually do a deep dive on Kevin Nash. It seems like there's enough meat on the bone there, so I don't want to say everything, and there's plenty to save. But the cool thing about Kevin is, and again, it's not like a drinking thing. This isn't like I'm a macho guy. He's fucking massive. He can drink
Yeah.
like 2, 3 bottles of wine like it's nothing. Not because he's trying to show off, just because like for you to get your normal, I'm an average person size buzz, he needs to just have a lot more. So, we would have a couple of these like there's at least a couple 2 or 3 on multiple movies because we've had a chance to work with him on a couple films where we've had these kind of like all night wine and believe it or not, occasionally on a cheat night, pizza nights where like that's what I love about Kevin because I'm kind of the same way. not that he's not a guy who's into having fun. I'm sure he's had plenty of his times at the bar in life, so to speak. But like, really, all Kevin wants to do on a movie set is find a couple people that he really vibes with, grab a pizza, grab a couple bottles of wine, and go in like the hotel suite and just fucking chill. And we'll drink that wine and eat that pizza till literally the sun comes up, like 4 or 5 in the morning, talking, bullshitting, as they say in the wrestling business, booking the territory and just like talking about what happened that day, talking about old school wrestling stories. So I've had some of my favorite times, like after the movie, kind of late night sessions, just bullshitting and listening to stories. I could listen to Kevin Nash talk all night long. So really great experience working with him. We're gonna switch gears now, so this doesn't turn into a Nash-a-thon, but he's an awesome guy. Mike, why don't we talk a little bit about Saving Christmas, which was well, a family-friendly Christmas movie with the backdrop of pro wrestling.
Yeah, you had a really nice wrestling backdrop. The XWA, I believe, out of Warwick, Rhode Island, provided a nice setting. And basically, it was the gingerbread brawl, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of the climactic scene of the film. And you had a pretty good double header of main event guys. Gangrel against Mike Bennett, who, of course, used a different name for the movie character. And there was some type of angle. You kind of did some wrestling booking in your film, which I liked. That the character that Mike played had like a broken leg and was trying to get out of defending his title. But through the miracle of Santa Claus, he had to defend that title that night. So that was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that was we talked a little bit about on our last episode, episode 13, which was our best days on set. There really was one night on Saving Christmas where it was just a magical kind of creative experience for me. But to back it up a little bit, Saving Christmas was a movie that kind of, is I call it like a shotgun movie, where basically like I got a phone call and they were like, "Hey, do you have a Christmas script?" I got a call from this company, Hollywood Media Bridge out of LA. Do you have a Christmas script? We need one right away. And I said, yeah, I've got some concepts. And they said, okay, can we hear them? And I said, this is exactly what I did. I said, can I call you back in 15 minutes? And they said, sure. And I hung up the phone and I called Kevin DeCristofano, who we've talked about a little bit on the show.
Pop culture, Kevin.
Pop culture Kevin. We've worked with him many times, and I came up with him through film school. I said, Kevin, I got a Christmas movie. I got to write. I need some pitches right away. Let's start brainstorming some shit. Do you want to write this thing with me? Yeah, of course. Let's do it. And in about 5 minutes, we came up with, okay, X-Files loving kids that are in search for the true identity of Santa Claus. And then I came up with the pitch of, yes, and they're big wrestling fans, and everything is culminating around this big wrestling show called the Gingerbread Brawl. Because you write what you know, and when you're in a jam, like I was, like these motherfuckers, and I hate to call them motherfuckers. I hope they don't be like, "Hey, man,
Gee whiz, we thought you were your friends.
money for that script." These people wanted that script quick, fast, and in a hurry.
These wonderful colleagues of mine that I respect
These
tremendously.
terrific colleagues that I really hope to work with again sometime wanted that script like right fucking away. So I had to write shit that I knew about, and I knew damn well about pro wrestling. So I made these kids the diehard little wrestling fans that I was as a young tyke, and I kind of put the backdrop of Christmas around it, and we truly recreated not only a Christmas themed, or I guess it's I got to say holiday themed. We got to be correct here. It was a holiday themed uh, wrestling event, which all catered around Ed Asner playing Santa Claus, eventually doing a run-in, to use a wrestling term, and basically magically healing through the powers of Christmas Mike Bennett's legs so that he can defend his title against Gangrel and David Gear in a handicap match. And the cool thing is, my favorite part about it, and I talk about this on episode 13, so check it out if you hadn't. I get to book the show, which in wrestling, booking is just another word for writing. It's the creative term for what they do. So I got to actually get in there with the wrestlers. Wrestlers like Matt Stryker was there doing commentator. Of course, my wrestling movie fairy godfather, I'll call him Tommy Dreamer, was there that night to kind of help me out. He was playing a commentator. And I remember just being in the ring and kind of being like, kind of just being like, hey, you know what? could we like power bomb David Gear onto Gangrel? Mike, could you do that? Do you think you could do that, Mike? And we'd try and be like, I don't know. And Matt Striker would be like, Matt Striker's like, yeah, he's not getting up. I wouldn't do that. Someone's gonna break their neck. And I was just like, yeah, let's not do that. But it was fun to like pick their brains and like hear how it all went down. And then I'll never forget. I've told this story before, but one of the more satisfying sort of home run feelings that you can get as a filmmaker is when you're writing a script, you have an idea for what that visual is going to look like, what that image is going to look like in your head. And once in a while, when you're looking at the monitor, it's not going to happen every day on set. If you're lucky, it happens once every couple days. But when you're looking at that monitor, the image you see on your monitor is exactly like the fucking image that you had in your head when you were picturing this thing. And when you can do that, that's like hitting a one-timer in hockey. It's like hitting a home run in baseball. That's like you fucking did it. You scored. So there I am, like watching the monitor. I'm watching this wrestling action play out just the way we kind of wrote it. And in my periphery, I can see all the fans in the XWA center. We probably had like over 100 extras. And I see this big move get hit. I see the ref hit 1, 2, 3, make the count. The bell rings, and the crowd goes nuts. And I can see like my image of the movie on the monitor, and I can see the fans going crazy. And it's a wonderful time. And I'll never forget that. Like I probably won't ever get to really book a wrestling match, but for me as a fan, that's the closest I'm ever going to get, probably. And it was a lot of fun.
You just have to make a sequel to that movie and have Gingerbread Brawl, whatever, for
The
that
return of the miracle in the gingerbread brawl.
annual event when the kids are in college or high school or something.
Motherfuckers, a term of endearment the New Englanders may
I
use.
love
It's
that
like a
comment.
definite, it's like boom, book definition.
I like
Motherfuckers.
that comment.
A,
Thanks, Andres.
a lovable friend. You're right. I did mean it as a term of endearment.
Tommy,
Um,
speaking of old time wrestling, I should mention Ox Baker was a good friend of mine, and kind of a mentor to both myself, David Gear, maybe to you to an extent. But Ox was just an outspoken, funny guy. He had done Escape from New York with John Carpenter, I believe, was the director, Kurt Russell. And we had a friendship. And, Ox unfortunately passed away in late 2014. In late 2013, Ox called me on the phone. He had some type of recent medical issue, and he was very concerned about his own future. And basically asked me, kind of told me to get over to his place as soon as possible with a camera because he wanted to tell the story of his pro wrestling career and his life. So I was able to get this cameraman that I knew from doing a lot of public access TV up in Brockton, Massachusetts, Roland Corcianzada. He came down. He met me at Brooklyn Coffee and Tea House in Providence, got in my car, and we drove down to Connecticut where Ox lived. And he did seem visibly a little hurt, like a little injured. It's a long story, but we recorded
yeah,
an interview that was basically Ox's last long form interview. And
that's cool.
yeah, I ended up, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that edited until after Ox passed away. But it is available on YouTube now on Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel. And it's called Ox Baker, One of the Boys. And
Yeah,
it's a
Ox
true.
Baker was if you don't know who Ox Baker is, and most of you probably don't. In fact, I'm probably willing to bet very few of you do.
Stephen E
He,
knows.
he was Ox Baker was an old time wrestler from the 60s and into the 70s and probably parts of the early 80s. And he was known as a vicious, mean old heel who was famous for the heart punch, which one time he actually did kill somebody in the ring. He didn't actually kill them. A person died,
Yeah.
just happened to die of a heart attack while
Ray
wrestling.
Duncan.
So from there on, a lot of times in the wrestling industry, again, from so many years of being ridiculed as that's fake, that's phony, that's bullshit, often what they'll do is they'll take real life scenarios and they'll jack it up, turn that dial up, from a 10 to a 12, and suddenly they'll play a real life scenario into the storyline. So Ox Baker, yeah, maybe the guy died of a heart attack, but as far as everybody in wrestling knew, it's like, no, Ox Baker's heart punch killed that motherfucker. And actually, it's kind of fun, just to wrap it up, and we won't spend any more time on Ox, but Ox and I, Ox was a fan of our movies, and a quick shout out to him. He did attend a couple of our premieres, and actually, I don't remember what year it was, but a few years ago, probably like I might have been like 7 or 8 years ago. I had a birthday dinner, and like the funny surprise, David Gear was like, "Ah, here's your birthday surprise." I was like, "What?" And it's Ox Baker, who is now, guys. If you don't know Ox Baker, he was like 6'7". This, at the height of his, in his heyday, so to speak, he was all of 300 pounds.
Big handlebar mustache,
Yeah, just like a
off
huge,
the face.
huge
Right.
mustache. So it's one of these things where this guy was a fucking character. And I remember sitting down at the restaurant and him just ordering everything, like eating like more food than I ever saw any human being be able to eat. Like, and he would like, bring us, I'll have this steak and bring me this. Like, he had like a couple entrees, a couple appetizers, like, just kept fucking ordering. Now, looking back, it's almost like David Gear was probably like, "Hey, Ox, order anything you want. It's on me, buddy." And he just like fucking went for it. But yeah, he was ordering up a goddamn storm. And I have a great photo um, somewhere. I'll have to post it of Ox on my birthday. It was really cool. So, but let's move along. We got a lot of ground to cover in this show. We're already approaching the hour 15 mark because we just love talking wrestling, man. Like, I could probably have a whole podcast on wrestling if I don't be careful, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it to movies, and we're going to talk about the movie Vault, where I had a really great fight scene, which I'm very proud of. I'm
Oh, yeah.
not trying to break my hand to pat myself on the back. But one of my favorite scenes in Vault is the prison fight sequence. There's a great fight between Clive Standen and a wrestler by the name of Apollo, who is a wrestler from, Mike, I believe, help me out here, but he's a Puerto Rican-based wrestler, right?
Yes, but he also, the first year of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, he was a major focal point. He was right in there with Ken Shamrock and Ron the Truth Killings and Jeff Jarrett fighting for the NWA World Title, and was kind of a tweener, meaning he was both a good guy and a bad guy, depending on who his opponent was. And
Yeah,
very talented guy, very strapping man too.
yeah, I was just gonna say, Mike, basically, in the word to use some wrestling terms, I needed a big, nasty heel to go opposite of Clive Standen, who Clive's a big guy. Clive's all of 6 foot, probably 6'4", 220, 230. He's a big strapping dude. I mean, the
Right.
guy literally played a fucking Viking and did it very well. So Clive's a big, big guy. So I needed a really big guy to make Clive look like he was in a potential Jeopardy situation. So we got Apollo in there, and Apollo, might not be he's probably he's about Clive's height, maybe 6'2", 6'3". Um, but, you know, 260, 250, just solid muscle. Just a real impressive looking dude. And the cool thing about it is it's kind of funny, like we said, he's of Puerto Rican descent, but for the most part, he played an Italian guy. It was kind of funny. He just kind of, we gave him like a short haircut, brushed it back. Yeah, he's just an Italian guy. So he played like this mob enforcer who was like, kicks some ass in the prison yard. And of course, I don't want to give away what happens, but uh, Clive is up for the challenge. Um, but the funny thing about that fight sequence is there were other wrestlers in that scene, and one of them in particular by the name of Justin Credible, who, if you don't know who Justin Credible is, go back to the ECW. Well, all of our ECW fans will know Justin Credible. I believe Justin Credible one time held the ECW heavyweight title.
He did.
And currently it's in production. There's a documentary that our friends are currently working on, that's following some of the challenges and struggles that Justin's had over the years. And Mike, do you want to talk a little bit more about Justin Credible and his contribution to the business?
Well, you and I often refer to him as basically like the fifth, the sixth member of the clique, kind of like you hear people say the fifth Beatle. But Justin Credible was right there with Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall, and
Yeah, and
he
if you
was.
don't know, real quick, guys, the Click was a very elite group, sort of like the Rat Pack of pro wrestling, if you will. So, if you were part of the Click, you were considered to be part of an elite group.
And what happened with Justin was he wasn't maybe as physically big as Diesel, Kevin Nash. So he got kind of sent to ECW, where Paul Heyman, the manager, took this guy, Justin Credible, who had been doing a really goofy gimmick of Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese man of war. And Justin's from Rhode Island. But basically, they repackaged him as this kind of tank top wearing, jean short wearing jerk, bad guy jerk. And he really got good heat with guys like Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman. And Justin Credible became the number one guy in ECW for about a year. And his career suffered because he had some, what do they call it? De-wrestling business, which basically means drug and alcohol abuse. And
Well, hang on. Let's take a quick microscope on that. Not to defend anyone, but for the people who don't know much about how this all works, pro wrestlers are often asked to work hurt,
right, injured.
work with injuries, and to work on the road. You're talking like 3, 4 nights a week, traveling hundreds of miles, crammed in cars, crammed in airplanes. Their bodies are put through horrible physical abuse. Imagine not sleeping in your bed 300 nights out of the year. Like, imagine only sleeping in your bed at home 65, 70 nights out of the year, and you're on the fucking road every other night, getting bashed around, banged around, slammed around, never getting time off. Football, baseball, basketball, hockey, every professional sport has an off season. There's no off season in wrestling. These people are out there every fucking night, year fucking round. A lot of these events are on holidays. When you're with your family on Christmas or on Thanksgiving, these people are often doing a show or traveling to a show.
Entertaining your family. The wrestlers are not with their families because they're entertaining your family, the audience.
Yeah, so again, not to defend wrestlers and not to give them an excuse for the drugs and the alcohol or the painkillers, but a lot of it comes from a legitimate place of just trying to self-medicate, strap your fucking boots on, and get out there the next night so that you can provide for your family and make sure that the next young gun in the back isn't going to try to take your spot, because it is a really elite space. So, I never like to do the point fingers and say, ha ha, and look at this guy when I find out that a wrestler is struggling with some kind of substance issue. Because I can't even fucking imagine what kind of shit I'd be going through if I had to be on the road 300 nights a year and, take all these chances with my body on a nightly basis and sacrifice having, quote, a normal life to live this life and entertain people, for a
Well,
living.
good point, Tommy, and well said. A lot of my favorite wrestlers, Louis Spicolli was in ECW. He passed away at a young age because of some of these issues. And the guy on my shirt, Brian Pillman, unfortunately passed away at a young age.
Well,
And
even the guy in my shirt, Roddy Piper, I mean, like,
right.
Piper lived to be, I want to say, in his early 60s, but, by today's standards, that's not a full life.
The documentary Credible, which I believe David Gear is the producer, and I believe he's the director now at this point. I don't want to misquote that, but the documentary is titled Credible. Hopefully, it'll be out maybe 2023. I'm just guessing, but it's really got a full picture of Justin's struggles and his successes, and comeback upon comeback. And he's a very smart guy. At one point, Justin Credible had Wrestling 101 on his own YouTube channel, and he would just break down various aspects of pro wrestling from an experienced guy. And I
Yeah, we
really
have here, Mike, not to interrupt, but we have on IMDb, according to IMDb, Credible, an intense and gritty documentary that gives us a window into the very real life of Peter Polanco, better known to the world as famed professional wrestler Justin Credible. And yes, I've got David Gear and David Gear written as writer-director. And we also have appearances made by wrestlers Dallas Page, Jake Roberts, Scott Hall, the late great Scott Hall, rest in peace. So this looks like a really cool piece. If you're looking to get a different kind of perspective on, I don't want to say a common story, but we've all heard of these kind of trials and tribulations that these kind of folks go through. This movie's also being produced by Chad Verdi and Chad Verdi Jr., Chelsea Vale, Paul Luba. a lot of great people that we've done a lot of great work with in this movie world are getting behind this um, just incredible documentary. So be on the lookout for that. I don't see a release date just yet, but I'm sure that'll be right around the corner. Um, but yeah, again, you can't knock these people for having some struggles. It's a really brutal business, and I think that beyond the flashy LCD lights and the fun action figures and the t-shirts and all of the other pageantry that comes with pro wrestling, a byproduct of it is flat out physical pain. These people are
Yeah.
getting dropped on their fucking bodies over and over and over again. And I've always heard this is always kind of fascinated about injuries in pro wrestling. I've often heard, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Shout out to Conrad Thompson. Thank you to the Podfather for providing us with all this great entertainment. Um, what's always funny is you hear that the injuries in wrestling often occur on the less than spectacular looking moves. It's often something like, "Oh, I just landed a little funny and I cracked a vertebrae." It's one of those things where my point is these people put their bodies at such risk that like you just never know what that one move is going to be that could like end a career.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of darkness that comes with this world, and I think to me that's probably why I'm so fascinated with it. Not just what I see in front of the camera, but I love learning about the behind the scenes aspect of like what these people have to go through to provide this product for us.
I got
Um,
a little touch of that, Tommy. You talked about butterfly stitches earlier. I shot this pseudo documentary titled Wrestling Son with Eliminator John Cronus, another ECW alumni, and a lady named Cassie Strader, or Cass Strader was her wrestling name. And basically, the midpoint of my movie, John had wrestled this bloodbath, like a hardcore style wrestling match in Watertown, Massachusetts. He's in the bathroom and he's stitching his own forehead up, and I'm sitting there with the camera. There's no medical doctor, and he's got this huge gouge on his head. And not to just to be honest, there was about 40 or 45 people in the audience that night, and
yeah,
he's
so
going
so
out
he
there
did yeah, he did
doing
that for a few dozen people. He
he did it
split
for a
it.
few dozen people and a few dozen dollars, to be honest with you. But it's these guys are so into it. This is their life, and so they live and die for it sometimes. So it is personal and it is real on
Yeah,
many
to
levels.
me, a lot of people see it as a couple guys in their underwear, throwing each other around the ring, but there's just so much more to it than that. And I think that as they say, you hear this phrase a lot. If you know, you know. I think the true wrestling fans, it's an if you know, you know thing. They're real fans. They understand that wrestling, not to romanticize it too much, but it really is a very personal performance piece. It's almost like at times like the right promo can come off like a really great monologue in a film or a one man show or there's a lot of personal pain like when you're writing a song that kind of can come out you can pull from your real life experiences and put it into your wrestling storyline and those are the things that I'm fascinated by. Let's real quick talk about briefly. I did a film called Money Plane a couple years ago, produced by Richard Switzer, and I had a chance to work with Edge, who a lot of people probably know Edge as this kind of brooding vampire type character. Had an
Million
amazing
dollar
run.
superstar.
Yeah, and he's still with the company and still filling seats. Looks terrific. He's kind of in the best shape of his life now, which is pretty incredible because he's been doing this for a long time. And that was cool to work with him just for a day. Like I have to say, like he's a guy who, in the movie business, you're not going to always make friends with people in the sense that, it's not like it is in your mind. Like we're not going to be going and getting beers. I'm not going to call Edge up and say, "Hey man, what are you doing Friday? You want to go get some dinner?" Like that's not going to happen. But I made a friend in the sense that, like we ended up following each other on Instagram and now like Edge will occasionally like a picture of mine. And it's kind of like what a funny world that I'm living in when like, the guy that I kind of grew up uh watching wrestle and do his thing in front of sold out Madison Square Garden is now liking a pic and kind of interacting and Because let's face it, guys, you know, and real quick, Paul London was also working on that movie, the former high flyer, tag team champion, cruiserweight champion with WWE, also a behind the scenes guy working in the music in the movie business now. So that goes to show you that, you know, it's not just about, and he has done some acting as well, but he's interested in behind the scenes as well. My point is, and I'm not saying these guys are being nice to me just because they want to be in the movie business, but we're in an era now where a lot of these pro wrestlers, like, they really give a shit about the film industry. They've seen things that The Rock has, you know, they've seen what The Rock has done. Let's face it, The Rock has completely changed the game for pro wrestling to the point where now, and I don't mean this for every wrestler across the board, and I'll probably get some heat from some wrestling people because some wrestlers might say, well, hey, no, that's not true. Like, my goal isn't to be an actor. My goal is just to be the best wrestler I can be. And that may be the case. But I have to believe that because of the success of The Rock, because of now The Rock, he's paved the way and opened doors for people like Batista and John Cena. The ultimate wrestling goal now is to wrestle for 5 to 10 years, make a name for yourself, and get into Hollywood as quickly as you can and make as many optimize as many years as you can in front of the camera as an actor and use that WWE or that AEW or whatever platform you're wrestling under, use that as a vault point, as a springboard into film. You know, I think that that's clearly become the formula for success now for a lot of pro wrestlers, and you're seeing it happen really across the board. And more so than ever, these people are now primed for it because, like we said, wrestling's evolved. You know, uh, everything is scripted now. When I was a kid, wrestlers were given basically a premise, and they said, "Hey, talk about this. Go talk about that," and they would go and make up their own fucking words, and that was part of the skill set.
Well,
Nowadays, they're
one of
handed a
the,
script.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. I'm just basically saying that, like, it's incredible now that, like, you know, okay, so wrestlers in movies is nothing new. Since the beginning of time, pro wrestlers have had cameos in movies, and any
Promotion era, yeah.
yeah, if they need a big guy or if they need something special, yeah, they've
And
always been
Wood
there.
movie had a wrestler tour.
Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan had a run, you know,
Roddy
with
Piper, They Live.
Roddy Piper had a run. So, like, I'm not trying to take anything away from those people. But clearly, The Rock is on a different plane in the sense that he's truly an A-list star, we've like nothing we've ever seen.
I think he's the number one box office star in the world right now, to be honest with
Yeah, I mean, people are literally talking about rumors for this guy to be someday making a presidential run, and that's like no joke. Like, that's serious business. So it's like it's pretty incredible if you look at what The Rock has done. Quick shout out while we're talking about The Rock. You'll be seeing him in Johnny and Clyde. He's a fellow Rhode Islander and a very talented actor. He's also playing the Iron Sheik on The Rock's new TV show, and that's Brett Azar, who is, like I said, playing the Iron Sheik. Just another little, like, funny, random little, like, wrestling
you.
connective
Connection.
tissue connection that's kind of passed through. But yeah, I think it's just, again, it shows you how powerful of a genre of pro wrestling is that we can get behind this and take a person like The Rock. And I'm not saying that Rock didn't work his ass off. We all know that he's, like, as they say, he's got it on this t-shirt, hardest worker in the room. But it's cool to see that America and the world has embraced a pro wrestler and allowed him to kind of achieve that level of fame and, frankly, power in the movie business and in entertainment, you know?
Stephen E mentions No Holds Barred, the WWF Vince McMahon Hulk Hogan movie that had Stan Hansen and the
Sure.
Masked Superstar and others in it, and Zeus. I did want to mention you're naming John Cena and Dave Batista. I wanted to throw Sasha Banks in that list too, Tommy, because what's that Star Wars show? The
Yes, Sasha
Mandalorian.
Banks has a really cool role in The Mandalorian, which is one of the
Right.
hottest shows in the Star Wars, well, hottest shows everywhere, but, you know, Star Wars in particular has a few shows going now, and I think you could easily make the argument that The Mandalorian's, you know, the hottest show to come out of the Star Wars realm in a long time. I mean,
Well,
even
here's
my mom loves The Mandalorian.
Well, here's a
Like, who
question.
would have ever thought that, you know?
Right. This young lady, she's from New England too. She's from Massachusetts. But Sasha, she's recently left the WWE under some controversial circumstances. So I wonder, Tommy, and this might be a whole other show someday, is will the wrestling business start competing with Hollywood for the top talents? I mean, are people going to want to build up these wrestlers if they have the fear that if they build up a Sasha Banks or a John Cena or Dave Batista, they're going to take that popularity and bring it over to the movie world? So, just a question we don't have to answer tonight, but just a question that came to mind as we were discussing that list of
Yeah, it's an
Hollywood.
interesting point. You know, will WWE be a little bit wiser about choosing to put the proverbial rocket pack on people that they think will fly right out of their stratosphere and into Hollywood? You know, will they maybe decide to champion more athlete types, more people that they think they can control a little bit better, more former collegiate wrestler rather than the person who's very charismatic? But ultimately, I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, let's face it, you can't just go from uh, a month or 2 or 3 under contract with WWE or even a year or 2 with WWE and think that you're gonna just snap your fucking fingers and end up in rock status. I think that that's kind of part of it, like, you have to achieve a certain level of success in the wrestling business before you
Upper
can even
echelon.
be considered to be in that next level of Hollywood, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Only maybe 20 wrestlers have transitioned to be Hollywood players. Our buddy there, Kevin Nash, is one of them. Stephen E also says he's mentioning Rocky. I think he's thinking of Rocky 3, which was honestly
Sure.
that kind of led to WrestleMania because Vince McMahon Jr. saw Hulk Hogan as Thunder Lips in Rocky 3. He said, "Hey, we used to have this guy under contract. What happened?" And long story short, Vince McMahon Jr. got Hulk Hogan back to the WWF, turned him into a babyface. They brought the AWA's Hulkamania to New York to the WWF. And then a year and change later, they're doing WrestleMania 1. And now we're 35 or 38 WrestleManias later, and they're still trucking.
Yeah, there's no question that Hulk Hogan was probably, you know, The Rock before The Rock. But let's face it, I think that, and this is a whole nother topic, and we're going to wrap the show up shortly, but I think it's one of those things where time is an interesting thing, and the benefits that certain superstars have, like, I hate to say it, but it's like a big flashing red light, social media. Can you imagine if in 1985, when The Rock was on top of the wrestling world, can you imagine if he had something like Twitter back then? Can you imagine at the height of that WWF, red and yellow, Hulksters, say your prayers, take your vitamins, and train hard? Like, can you imagine if that guy had a fucking platform like Twitter?
You mean
How many
Hogan?
followers he
The
would have
Rock.
had?
You mean Hogan?
Hogan, rather. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, can you imagine if Hogan had that kind of a platform available to him in 1984,
Right.
85? Like,
Hulkster tweets out, "Hey brothers, make sure you eat your vitamins tonight before I body slam Big John Studd on
well, I think
Saturday's main event."
yeah, yeah, I mean, I think part of it's that, and, you know, yeah, that's the funny approach, but I mean beyond that, like, I'm talking about, like, when it came time for him to really jettison out of wrestling and become more of a mainstream star, one of the things that The Rock has used, one of the key tools is you see The Rock's crazy workout videos on his Instagram. You see him doing all of these amazing feats of strength. You see him doing fun things like fishing in the man-made fishing pond that he's built in his backyard. You get to know the person from a real intimate standpoint, and we all feel like we know The Rock. Like, The Rock's like one of our buddies. Hulk Hogan didn't have that tool, you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to make this like a comparison thing. This is simply like, you know, it's a fun what if food for thought. Like, it's amazing to think what social media has done for these stars, and that's why I'm saying, like, I think that part of the reason why The Rock has been able to get over like he has and why maybe Hulk Hogan's movie career kinda fizzled a little bit was they didn't have that constant in your face social media, "Check this out. look what I'm doing, not just every day, but like every few hours, you can find out what the fuck I'm doing. I think that The Rock has been really brilliant about capitalizing that. I've often studied his social media approach and just been like, wow, this guy's amazing, like what he does. So yeah, I think that that's something to say. You know, you hate to compare generations. That's always why I hate these conversations about like who's better, LeBron or Jordan, or it's like you can't do it. You just it's not fair to anyone to be comparing. But it is interesting to think about what Hulk Hogan would have done if he could tweet to all the little Hulkamaniacs.
Yeah. Time portals. If you could put someone from one era into a different era, how would they adapt?
Things we just won't know.
Yeah.
But to wrap it up, guys, you know, be on the lookout for Tommy Dreamer. You know, again, Tommy Dreamer is my wrestling fairy godfather. He's been in almost every one of my movies. He really only missed a couple. If he did miss a movie of mine, it's probably because he was already booked on a show or something like that, and the scheduling just didn't work out. But you'll see him and Johnny and Clyde. Like I said, you'll see Brett Azar also in Johnny and Clyde. That's the movie that I directed almost a year ago today. I directed it back in September, and it stars Megan Fox. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to talk more about this movie. We should have a trailer pretty soon. We should have a lot of exciting things coming down the road. But back to wrestlers. I don't think wrestling and entertainment, and I don't think wrestling and movies and that crossover is going anywhere. I think that's something that we're going to see for many years. Like I said, it kind of always was a part of cinema. It was a little bit more of in a stunt casting way. It was a little bit more in a we're looking for specific types who cast the big scary wrestler or whatever. But now I think we're at a point where not only are we seeing a lot of wrestlers in front of the camera, but hey, here's something I'm pretty excited about. And listen, nobody will believe me if I say it, so it doesn't matter. But I kind of fucking predicted this a long time ago. And I'll say it again today to reiterate what I'm talking about. I see a little bit of a wrestling movement in dramatized productions where we've got Todd Phillips working on the Hulk Hogan movie right now. We've got a Von Erich movie that was just announced that is going to be, you know, a pretty cool property where, real quick, let me punch in
Zac
my
Efron is playing
yes,
Kieran.
yes, Zac Efron, that's what it is. Zac Efron playing Kerry Von Erich. That's a pretty big fucking deal right there. So I feel like now we're gonna see a future when who knows, you might see, and wrestling fans will know what I'm talking about. You might see the Monday Night Wars be a scripted episodic show on TV. Like I feel like wrestling is a very unpoached, ripe for the taking world of storytelling where there's just a ton of movies and television shows based off of some really larger than life and incredible characters that I think you're going to see Hollywood turn to in the next 5 years. And you mark my words, once that Hulk Hogan movie comes out, where you've got Thor himself there, Chris Hemsworth, uh, playing Hulk Hogan, I mean, that's going to be a fucking hit, man. If that's not a license to print money right there, I mean, you've got Todd Phillips, who directed The Joker and Old School. So, you know, he's got the darkness, you know, he's got the humor. He's handling a Hulk Hogan property. Man, that's going to be something fucking special. And I really think that that's going to be sort of the 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 spark plug to get an entire genre of wrestling based movies and TV shows off the ground.
Well, you said
Um,
it first.
yeah, no, you'll see it. And if you haven't seen it, if I'm a big fan of this, I don't believe they're coming back. But there's a great show called I'm blanking on it now. Mike, what's
Hello?
no the wrestling the it's like not wrestling the shadows. The dark side of wrestling.
The dark side of the ring.
Yeah, Dark Side of the Ring. If you haven't
Right.
seen Dark Side of the Ring, and trust me, I'm really not giving it the respect it deserves by not being able to come up with the title, but it's been a long day and it's been a long show. You got to check out Dark Side of the Ring. Just Google it.
Fights.
If you're a wrestling fan, really great, dark, uh, cinematic reenactment based docu series. Really unique stuff that they got going on with that show. I think all wrestling fans should give that a whirl. You'll find some obscure dark stories that you're like, oh, I never even heard of these guys
Women's
that
story.
you might like. You get the Brian Pillman story, and then you'll hear really, classic stories like the Owen Hart tragedy and, a lot of the more famous dark wrestling stories. So give that a try and be on the lookout because I really do feel as though pro wrestling is sort of going to be sweeping the entertainment world in the next couple of years. Um, that's all I have for now. I think that we've gone through all these questions and we got everyone. Hey, we appreciate y'all listening. And I'm going to say this again. Thank you so much for chiming in with us. We love the interaction. And if you haven't already, take a second, go to my channel. That's Tom DiNucci on YouTube, and just click subscribe if you haven't. And if you got any pals, any buddies that you think might be interested in our weekly program here, hey, let them know. Do a David Gear. Remember, when you're going to introduce someone, don't just introduce them as like, hey, this is Joey or whatever. Give them a couple seconds. Give them a sentence or two.
Give 'em a
Introduce
push.
a little levity. Tee it up. That's something that I think we can learn from this episode. Hey, man, if you don't help your friends out, nobody will. And if your friends don't help you out, they're not really your fucking friend. So remember that when you're going to introduce someone, give them a little bit of a lead in, a little bit of respect.
Sure.
Elevate that motherfucker a little bit.
Good life lesson, buddy.
So, guys, we don't know what our topic for next week's going to be. Mike and I are going to put our heads together. You'll notice real quick, I wanted to wait until the end of the show because I don't want to distract anyone. But you'll notice that Mike is chiming in from a different room. We got an unusual room. You know what that room is? It's actually about 50 feet away from me upstairs in my house right now. Mike is here in Rhode Island. He made the trek all the way up from Florida. Really and truthfully, I mean, there is a little bit of a personal family engagement he has later on in August, but really, let's face it, Mike, tell us why you really came up here.
Came up for the Ric Flair's last match gathering at Casa de DiNucci because it's very important to celebrate the life and career of Ric Flair. I saw Ric Flair wrestle Nikita Koloff for 56 minutes in Baltimore, Tommy, before Flair got disqualified for chucking Nikita over the top rope. And nobody was disappointed. I mean, these days people would complain about the ending and take away half a star because of the ending. But when I was a kid, seeing Ric Flair wrestle for 56 minutes was quite an experience. I saw the guy wrestle Ricky Steamboat, and now we're going to watch him tagging up with his son-in-law, Andrade, against Jay Lethal and Double J Jeff Jarrett in the tag team main event. But I'm looking forward to watching that with you. I think it's going to be awesome. Thanks for having me. And everything's very exciting. It's a very big week for wrestling, so I'm glad we were able to contribute whatever we could to this. I was so happy to have my book now in hardcover, Tommy. It's not just in soft cover.
Oh God,
cover.
It's back.
It's a hardcover, and I know Stephen E. and everybody are ordering. I know Kim Kaling ordered it about 6 months ago. I don't know if she's read it, but she did order a copy, so I appreciate that.
The nice thing about that, Mike, is it's a nice hard surface if you were looking for something to roll a joint on, or perhaps if you wanted to eat something, you could use it as a little table. No, I'm just kidding.
You model and balance it on your head.
There we go. You can practice your posture. Mike has worked very hard on that book. Check it out if you haven't. It's called Fight or Play Basketball. You can find it in your Google machine. I can't wait to watch Ric Flair make that walk down that aisle one more time. I hope you all enjoy it too. So here's a sign off to the kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, jet flying, limousine riding, Rolex watch wearing son of a bitch, Ric Flair. We can't wait to see you walk that aisle. We can't wait to see you all next week. We're going to be talking about the results of that match and the outcome and how much fun we had watching it. And hey, thanks for joining us. I think this might be like a record for our longest episode of And Action yet.
Yes. Stephen did want us to know about Terrificon. I don't know if he has ventured. I'm not even sure who's going to be there, if there's some wrestlers, but we've talked about conventions in the past as far as Rock and Shock and the movie that you had premiere there, Tommy, one year. Thanks.
Yes, check that out. If you're looking for some fun, Terrificon will be at the casino Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So check it out.
Fun to be exact.
if you're looking for some additional wrestling action, maybe there'll be some wrestlers there. Kim, thanks for joining us. Steven, thanks for being there with the wrestling knowledge. A couple wrestling flexes there. We're all very impressed.
Hey, Tommy, don't forget Will D. Koff also had a scene in Almost Mercy as one of the police
Yes,
officers.
real quick, Will Koff, I meant to mention him during the vault sequence, where there's this card robbery. Will Koff was an old school territory wrestler back when, as they say, men were men, and there was a lot of crazy shenanigans that I'm sure that he had to put up with. I bet you he could write an entire series based on some of the exploits that he witnessed back in the early to mid '80s as a
He survived a match with Abdul the Butcher in Texas in World Class.
Yeah, traveling pro wrestling back in the '80s, man. I'm telling you, I said it now, I'll say it again. Such an untapped uh, treasure trove of storytelling. I've read so many great wrestling books, and I'm telling you, it's only a matter of time before the people in Hollywood are like, fuck, man, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to find this shit fascinating. Like, this is just fascinating stories of the human spirit. Um, Andres, thank you, brother. Thank you for checking in. We appreciate all your support. Kim, thanks for being with us. And again, Stephen, thank you for being there as always. We came at you tonight a little bit later than usual. We're trying to really kind of just make this happen on a weekly basis. Maybe eventually we'll keep it consistent. But in the meantime, we're happy to be here with you. We can't wait to see you next week. We hope you all enjoy this wonderful summer week of wrestling fun. We'll see you next time.